and this query is going to be update adverts set timestamp equals, and then I'm going to set this but with an expiry of, let's say, 9 there. That will just give us a bit more time to sorry, it's not expires. Okay, so I'm just performing this query within PHP just to update all of the values. You can see 3 rows affected, and now all of our timestamps have been updated. So let's keep an eye on this shown column, and we'll refresh. You can see that we've got the first advert up here, we've then got the second advert up, and then we've got the third advert up. But when we refresh, nothing happens because I've commented out this query, which is going to update all the values that have been shown back to 0. So if we go ahead and just browse this again, you can see that all values are now 1, because as you saw a moment ago, I'd looped through all of them. So this query is very, very important. We're selecting the count of adverts from the adverts table where shown is equal to 0. And now what we can do down here is we can create an if statement, and we can say if MySQL result, and that's shown and 0. So we're selecting the result from our shown query, which is up here, and we're selecting the first row because we're only returning the count. Then what are we going to do in here? Well, we're going to create another query, and this query is going to be update adverts set shown equal to 0. So that's going to check if all adverts have been shown, set all adverts that they haven't been shown, and then the loop will start over again. So we'll have a look at this by refreshing. Okay, yeah, so the reason this hasn't worked for now is because they're already set to 1, and this query is not working because of that. So we need to revert back to our original settings in order to sort of restore, our original state. So I'm going to, update adverts set shown equals 0. If I click go, that's done. Now we can return here and refresh our page. Now if you weren't sure why that was happening, because we were all set to 1 here, the script only calculates if everything's been shown upon an advert being shown. So it will still work, it's just because we're in the development stage of this that we need to sort of revert back to everything being 0 beforehand. So when I refresh, you can see that we've got the first add up, and then not the second, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Okay, so again I've made a terrible mistake. If MySQL results shown, and we haven't had a comparison, so we need to add in the equals operator, and we are going to say if the count of everything is equal to 0, i.e. is everything equal to 1. Okay, so if this result returns the value 0, that means that there are no values where nothing has been shown, therefore we update everything. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh, and you can see that now we have a perfect advert rotation fairly. Okay, so that's that. We can monitor this in the database, but I'll leave that up to you because I've already wasted enough time with my mistakes. So we've reverted back to everything being 0 here if they've all been shown, and that's how we create our fair rotation system. We give each advert an opportunity to show themselves, and when all adverts have been shown, we start at the beginning. Okay, so if you're unsure about this, examine the initial query that we created up here, and then you'll understand how this works and why it works. So obviously what we have now is our rotation system is done, but when we click on something, we need to go, we basically go to go.php and we specify an advert ID of 3. You can see that whatever advert we click on, the ID is different because we inserted that earlier in here. Okay, so let's go over to go.php and start writing this out. And the reason that we create a go.php is so we can log in or log our clicks. So when we click, go.php is going to log the click and then redirect the user to the URL. So the first thing here we need to do is obviously include the connection to our database. And remember, we're in the root directory, so we need to connect to advert/db.inc.php. What we're then going to do is check that this get variable here, advert ID, is actually set. So let me go back there. We need to say if is set $_get advert ID. Okay, so if it is set, we can create a block there, and I'm going to redefine this variable, and I'm going to say advert ID is equal to $_get advert ID. Okay, now for security reasons, because anyone can manipulate the data at the end of here, you'll see an error there in it. Advert ID. Okay, so we because the user can type anything after here themselves if they wanted to, we need to cast the value that we're passing to an integer. And the reason for this is that we're going to be using this advert ID inside our database queries. So we don't want the user to be able to manipulate data in order to perform an SQL injection. So we just simply put in rounded brackets before this variable int, and then that just goes in brackets. So that will cast it to an int. So let's go ahead and echo our advert ID, and you can see how that passes from here to here. So whatever advert that we click, it will pass this variable back, and then we can do something with it in our page. And you'll notice that earlier, if I was to type something in there, you can see that it casts it to an int. In this case, it's 0. Okay, so that's just for security purposes with regards to SQL injection. So the first thing we want to do is update the fact that the user has actually clicked on this advert. Remember, we have our clicks column here, which we need to update depending on which advert is clicked, and obviously we've already passed the advert ID, so this is simply done with a MySQL query. So we want to update adverts, remember our table name again, and we want to set clicks equal to clicks plus 1. Okay, so we're doing exactly the same thing as we did with the impressions, but we're updating the clicks this time because the user would have clicked and been directed to go.php. And obviously we need a where clause because we need to say where advert ID is equal to advert ID. Remember this, remember this value here is what we're passing through our page. So whatever advert that the user clicks on now, this query here will actually update that value depending on which advert they've clicked on. Okay, so let's test that before we go any further. At the moment the clicks are 0, 3 and 2. Let's go ahead and click on an advert. Let's go back to our original page. Let's click on this advert and go back to our database. You can see clicks just in the corner here, but when I click browse, you can see that this one is updated from 2 to 3, and that's dogs.png, which is the image that we just clicked on, or the advert that we just clicked on. However, at the moment what's happening is we're being redirected to go.php, but nothing's happening. Now our overall aim is to count our click, but then down here we want to actually redirect the user to the URL associated with that advert. So I'm going to create a query called URL query, and that's going to be equal to MySQL query. And in here what we need to do is we want to select, the URL from adverts. So essentially what we're doing is we're selecting this URL here, and you've probably guessed what we're going to do in our query, where the advert ID is equal to this here. So where advert ID is equal to advert ID. Okay, so now what we can do is we can grab a result from this. So we're going to create a new variable called URL, and this is going to be equal to MySQL result, and in here we need to specify the query that we want to take the result from, the row, and then the field itself. Okay, so we've selected the field here. It's row 0 because it's the first record that we've returned. Obviously we're only ever returning one record with this, and then we're selecting the URL field. Okay, so now what we can do is come down and say header, and we can say location, and we're going to append on URL because URL is going to be the URL that's returned. Let's just comment that out for now and echo out the URL that we're getting returned, just so we can see that it's working. Now obviously I've got all the URLs set to google.co.uk, but generally if you've created this correctly and you followed exactly what I've said, it will work. So let's click on this one. You can see that we're being displayed google.co.uk because I'm echoing out the result from this query. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Now we can uncomment out our header, and what that's going to do now is it's going to redirect the user. I always like to use die after a header redirect, just in case the user has modified their browser, and if we had any code under here which we didn't want to be accessed afterwards, then we need to protect ourselves that way. Okay, so now what should happen is when we click on the advert, we actually get redirected to the website associated with it. So let's go ahead and click on this, and you can see that we've got google.co.uk opened in our browser. Okay, so there's one thing I'm going to change in this, and that's going over to ads.inc.php, and I'm actually going to set a target here of blank. So target equals blank. And that's all that's going to do, is it's going to ensure that we open up the advert in a new tab, okay, or in a new window. Okay, so we've essentially created a fair rotation system. We're able to add or track impressions and track clicks. And obviously this code is going to work for an unlimited amount of adverts, so you can go into your database and you can insert as many adverts, and they'll always be fairly rotated.